Muted.
Yeah, do I qualify for the O-1 visa? This is a question that comes to us every day, and we're located here in New York City. We have Val on the line, Valerie, who's also part of Stern Deed over there on the West Coast, and this process of getting the O-1 visa and going through all this has a lot of moving parts here. So we thought it was best that we get someone who clearly knows a lot about this subject and deals with it every day on the line to answer some questions and give people a chance to really get in specifically about their case. Often you'll get information from one source or from one lawyer or someone you met at a bar or at a party, and that becomes your understanding of what the O-1 visa is. But I think it's really important to understand, particularly with this description of being exceptional, that in some degree it is subjective, and it comes down to how well you can present your case and the experience you've had. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Raquel to you all. She's an attorney here in New York City. She's a partner at Asadi and Milstein, and she has done more O-1 visas than I can think of, and done quite a very high-profile individual. So Raquel, if you're there, do you want to just jump on the line there?
Sure, yes. Hi. I am an immigration lawyer, as Nimmer's mentioned, and I handle O-1 visa cases regularly for all types of professions, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I can just give you a little bit of background in terms of what the O-1 is and what's required. There's certain points that are essential to understand, and first and foremost, it's a work visa. It's a temporary work visa. And so you must be coming here with plans to work in the United States and not just to find work, which is really important. Second element is that a petitioner is required. Some people refer to it as a sponsor, but it is a petitioner, which could be an employer or it could be an agent, and I can get into that a little bit later. And the third and most important element is really about you and your achievements and your background and documenting that with substantial evidence. So as each field of work is different, there's different types of evidence that's required. One other thing to note also is people refer to this visa as an artist visa, but in fact it applies to all types of work in all industries, from sciences, math, athletics, you name it. So really anyone, as long as you can qualify, can apply for the O-1 visa.
Okay, I think that's great. And, sorry, we have had a whole... I'm sorry there. Did I jump on top of you there, Raquel?
No, it's fine. I just don't know how much... I can start answering questions, or I can go into greater detail.
Yeah, well, look, we had a couple of people email questions in, and I think that thing you just hit on there about the difference between the employer and the agent. We had this guy, Angelo, from Greece, and he's a stunt guy. And because in his profession he needs to have an agent for him to get work, he asked the question, can the sponsor and the agent be the same person, or can they be different? Does that make sense?
Not a lot of sense, because a lot of people refer to the petitioner as a sponsor. So the petitioner is required. The petitioner signs off on all the paperwork. Just to break down who a petitioner is, a petitioner has to be a U.S. entity. So it could be any incorporated U.S. company, a U.S. citizen, or a U.S. permanent resident. So any of those three entities can act as an agent or act as a direct employer. So I'm not sure. So the agent has to be a petitioner if he's going to be filing, or he can act as an employer as well. But 100% of the time, a petitioner is required. And again, some people call it a sponsor, but technically it is a petitioner.
Yes, I think what he's asking there is, can the petitioner be one company, and can he still have an agent with another company? If somebody files as his agent, can he still have another agent?
Yes.
And okay, and then we had a question here about changing status. Changing from the visa waiver program, say somebody came here as a tourist, and then they want to move on to an O-1. Let's just say they've got here for 3 months. How does that work?
So the basic law here is that anyone who's in the United States as a visa waiver doesn't hold a visa status. So you can never change from a visa waiver to any status ever. You always have to leave the country. However, if you're here as a visitor with a visa, being a B1, B2 visitor visa, you can change your status while you're in the United States. In fact, you can change from any visa status while you're in the U.S. to an O1, including J1s, which sometimes have issues with that. So you definitely need a visa status, and you can't change from a visa waiver to an O1.
Okay, and when you say visa status, if someone is out of status, what if someone, say, overstayed their visa or something like that? Can they then apply for the O1?
Generally not, because they're not in status. So really the critical issue is what status were they in, and then how long have they been out of status. And then we could take a look at it on a case-by-case basis. But in general, if you're not in a status, there's really no option to change status unless there was some circumstance outside of their control that they can document to show that it was beyond their own control to handle it.
Out of their control.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Look, let's open up the line here. I think we're going to send it over to Zoe there in Richmond, Victoria. Zoe, do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Okay, my name's Zoe. I'm a photographer from Melbourne. I'd really love to get an O visa to come work in New York. So I do a lot of different kinds of photography, a lot of architecture, some commercial photography with advertising agencies. And yeah, I've looked into it a lot. I think the biggest hurdle that I can see is trying to, I've been told that you have to prove that you have work lined up for like say 3 years. It's a 3-year visa. So I think that's probably in my mind the hardest thing to kind of come up with, that obviously not being in the United States now, to be able to speak to potential employers.
Right, that's exactly the issue. So what I see a lot of times is if you're not currently in the U.S. and you're trying to line up potential employers, it's much more difficult. Clearly you don't have the contacts and you're not around to actually make these new contacts. What people generally do in this type of situation is if you can find one petitioner or one employer who can hire you on a part-time, and now O1s are fantastic. In my view, they're the best visa out there, and they are the most flexible by all means. So you can work part-time, I mean, even as little as, let's say, 5 hours a week. And as long as you can find one employer who can file for you and sponsor this case as a petitioner, once you're here, then you can file concurrent O1s. You can have more than one O1 that's active at the same time. You can also amend the O1 that you had to come over and add employers. So there's always flexibility with these O1s. You're never locked in for the full 3 years. But also, something really important to keep in mind is as a photographer, and when you're working in fine arts too, you have incredible flexibility because you can have someone act as a manager or an agent for your case and give you almost as much flexibility as you could possibly imagine in terms of creating art, exhibiting art, things like that. When it comes to, because you work in commercial art too, when it comes to that, then you might need to look at amending or filing a concurrent O1. But in terms of creating your own photography and doing exhibitions, you can do that in a very, very open and free way with just one petitioner acting as a manager, and even get paid directly by various sources in terms of like sales and things like that of your artwork. So when it comes to fine artists and photographers, it's a beautiful area to be in with O1s because you really have a lot of choices.
Okay, great.
Do you know anyone in the States? Are you in contact with any other photographers or people in your field?
I know a couple of photographers who've moved over there from Melbourne, so they're living there now. I also have some family in Washington, D.C., but they're not like immediate relatives, so I don't think they'll be able to help with this. Yeah, that's about it though.
There's something else also to consider, which is, there's something called an O2 for essential support personnel. So if you have friends who are photographers who are here on an O1 and you're invited to work on the similar projects with them, you can come over as an O2, which means you're tacked on to their O1 and you can only do projects that they're authorized to do, and then find potential employers once you're here, and then try to get your own O1 once you're here, and And that way you can change from an O2 while you're here to an O1.
Okay. Is it also possible as well to just come over, like you said, on a just a visitor visa and not work, and then kind of do some research and find some people and then change status?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, another possibility there might be to do some volunteer work or just to make connections with people if you want to come over and, you know, build up those contacts.
Are you allowed to do volunteer work on a visitor visa?
I mean, technically, no. I mean, it depends on what type of, volunteering you're doing or training. It's very specific, and there's information at the State Department's website that discusses what kind of work you can do as a visitor, but there is some type of work that you can do in terms of training or attending meetings, negotiations, things like that, in terms of finding jobs and negotiating contracts and things like that.
Okay.
Cool. Did that answer your question, Zoe?
I think so. Does Stern Deeds actually like act as a petitioner for people, or?
Yeah, we do. That's exactly what we do. We petition on behalf of people to get them as their agent to enable them to work for multiple different employers. That's exactly what we're trying to. That's what we are doing to a whole host of different professions and people from around the world. So, look, we'd love to talk to you afterwards and just sort of look at some of your case and how strong it sounds. But, you know, it sounds like you've got quite a bit of evidence and you've got quite a bit of experience there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I've probably got, I can get everything together to get the visa. It's just the actual finding kind of proof of work for when I'm over there is the hardest thing.
Sure. Yeah, no, we can talk to you about that and put you in touch with other photographers and talk to them how they've done it in the past.
Okay.
It's all part of the process, and you're right. That is the one area that people will sort of struggle with. And you know, Raquel, I was sort of just talking to her there about her other people in her industry that are here. I think they're really important people that you'll use in one instance to get the visa, but also to understand that market and how, you know, that's your first people in your network when you're coming to a new place. You know, letting them know that you're planning on coming over and want to, you know, start working. I think they're the first people you want to approach to get advice and, you know, the lie of the land.